This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. If this is your first time joining us, what's up, then? We're gonna spend the next hour diving into topics about what the heck's going on in the world around us, and then we'll finish with a quiz. Just kidding. We're gonna keep it casual. Just sit back and let us take the wheel for a bit. Here's what we got for you in this episode. Every headline is zeroing in on the Omicron variant, what we know about this new variant of concern, and how it might impact you. That's coming up in today's show. Then, more states are starting to give farm workers overtime pay. And while it is a step toward wages that match the work, the move might create other complications in the industry. But first, climate change has a far-reaching impact on a number of things, one of those being the ocean. Climate change can cause sea levels to rise in two different ways. The first being, as the ocean warms, seawater expands and takes up more space. The second is caused by ice melting. We have to remember that impacts from sea level changes can differ from place to place, and it's only expected to get worse. The National Ocean Service, a part of NOAA, says currently sea levels are rising about 1/8 of an inch per year, but by 2100, sea levels may rise another 1 to 8 feet. In the meantime, beaches will continue to be eroded, infrastructure like roads and bridges will be damaged, there will be stronger storms and more flooding, the list goes on. In the US, almost 40% of the population lives in coastal areas, but this is a global problem. Asia is currently the continent with the biggest risk, as many cities there are low-lying. Eventually, many people will be forced to move to higher ground, while basic services like internet access could be threatened. And beyond people like you and me, marine life and other animals are at risk. Some habitats will become unlivable. Here at ITL, we've already shown you the impacts of so-called hypoxic zones, parts of the ocean that become unlivable because of the lack of oxygen. Rising levels can have a range of impacts on how we live and can affect certain sports, like surfing. If you're looking to catch some waves, they might not be there in the future. This comes at a time when the sport is growing in popularity. I mean, we just saw our first Olympic surfers in Tokyo, but the changing tides could mean bleaker seasons. This week, we'll be airing a 3-part series on climate change and its effects on extreme sports, brought to us by Newsy's very own Meg Hilling. She traveled to California and Colorado to bring us these stories. We start off this series by doing a deep dive into surfing and looking at how climate change is reshaping our waves.
As surfers, we're kind of the stewards of the ocean.
For professional surfer Shaun Burns, faces in the lineup aren't the only thing he notices when paddling out at his local surf break in Santa Cruz, California.
We're able to see firsthand the changes that climate change is having on the ocean.
Like generations of surfers before him, Burns has built his entire life around observing and understanding the coastal environments that make his passion possible. A way of life that he says is increasingly being altered by climate change.
I don't know if there's an exact moment. I think just growing up and seeing the cliffs around here eroding day by day, and just understanding that just one simple rock change or one part of the cliff that breaks can change a wave.
From the erosion of the cliffs that help shape the breaks along Steamer Lane, to the shifting of seasons that bring swells to the California coast.
Winter generally starts later now and it ends earlier. And so, there's less of a window to surf around here.
Burns says the very waves he and so many others carve across in Monterey Bay are changing, and not in the way they should.
I do believe that waves can go extinct.
The surf community in Santa Cruz aren't the only ones noticing alarming shifts in how waves are breaking. That is, the section of the coastline where the waves crash.
From my perspective, both as someone who enjoys this system, but also studies it, yes, climate change is going to be an issue for these resources.
This is Dr. Dan REINEMAN, a surfer and scientist with California State University, Channel Islands.
There's no doubt in my mind that sea level rise is going to have really significant impacts on coastal systems, and in particular on surf breaks in the decades to come.
In 2017, REINEMAN conducted a study which surveyed just over 1,000 surfers from 105 surf spots in California on what their present-day preferences for surfing were. Using this data, REINEMAN and his team were able to infer what rising sea levels as a result of climate change meant for the survival of the waves these surfers enjoyed by the year 2100.
The outlook is not great. Something like a third of the surf spots that we had data for in California are not likely to survive providing surfers the kinds of conditions that they like today.
According to the study, 16% of the surf spots evaluated are in danger of what's called drowning. That is, the waves won't break anymore. 18% are threatened but could adapt if natural systems of the shorelines aren't disturbed. Meanwhile, 5% could see a rise in optimal surfing conditions with rising sea levels.
Some waves break on fixed features, right? A shelf of hard rock reef, and that hard rock will change very slowly over time, and sea levels might simply rise past it, and then that wave won't really break anymore. It'll drown essentially. But in other places, if it's a wave that breaks over a sandy bottom and the sand supply is intact, you might see that wave more capable of adapting into the future. But it really depends on the local conditions at each place.
One of the largest factors that determines what comes next for surf spots like this in Ventura is the willingness and speed with which communities react.
But it's only been really in the last decade that there have been efforts to protect waves as important sort of cultural recreational resources. Where we're sitting right now at Surfers Point in Ventura, California is a really marvelous example of what a community can do to look ahead and come up with a solution that will work with the coast itself and maybe better position that stretch of coast and that community to deal with climate change. Where we're sitting right now is a beautiful natural dune system. It looks natural, but it was actually manufactured in this place that used to be a parking lot with a bike path and a seawall that were crumbling into the ocean.
REINEMAN says natural replacements like this can play a pivotal role in preserving surf breaks, but aren't always an easy sell.
But it's really hard to make an argument to, say, remove parking spaces and put in dunes. Right? That equation doesn't always get solved in favor of dunes. If we don't make smart choices as coastal communities, we might make decisions and protect certain parts of our society at the expense of other things. We'll really see a complete loss of beaches, and the only people that'll be left to enjoy that coastline are the folks with big oceanfront homes that have been fortified against the rising seas.
As a result, REINEMAN says it is crucial that surfers speak out about the changes they are witnessing if steps are going to be taken to preserve breaks in the waves they generate.
I think surfers, as a community of coastal resource users, have a lot to contribute there.
Many surfers agree.
We have a really unique perspective because we're in the water day in and day out, and we literally schedule our lives around tides and conditions.
Nick STRONG-CVETICH is the Chief Executive Officer of Save the Waves Coalition, a nonprofit that teams up with surfers and different organizations to care for and defend surf ecosystems around the world. The coalition carries out this work through preservation programs, as well as through their app, which allows surfers to flag concerns they have at their local breaks.
If low tide is what we need for waves to break, and all of a sudden we have permanent high tide with sea level rise, we have a big problem, like an existential problem.
STRONG-CVETICH says the team's goal is to protect 1,000 surf ecosystems by 2030 by making it clear to local governments just how important these areas are.
I think that's the struggle with climate change, is it's still, even though the implications are massive, it's still abstract for many people. And I think when you can break it down to how it impacts people's lives on a daily basis, that's where change is going to start. And we don't have a lot of time.
Helping sell the importance of these surf breaks? Economics.
We've done a number of studies where we've presented our work to decision makers or to elected officials, and sort of when you have no number, it's valued default at $0. Surf actually drives a huge part of the economy. It drives jobs, it drives housing prices, it drives tourism revenues.
According to a 2017 report, professors from the UK and Australia estimate the worldwide value of good surfing waves to be around $50 billion per year. A massive economic asset, STRONG-CVETICH says is undeniably worth maintaining.
We maintain skate parks and soccer fields and baseball fields and volleyball nets and all those things for recreation in other sports and other Olympic sports. But with surfing, we really don't maintain the coastal ecosystems that make this sport possible. And I think with climate change, we have to start thinking about that. Because if we adapt without thinking about our recreational assets, all of a sudden we've thrown them away for no reason because we decided to build a seawall on top of them, or a port, or some other part of, armoring and adaptation that may be unnecessary or poorly planned because they didn't have the whole economic picture.
It's time for us to step up and use our voice and opinions.
For Burns, who's teamed up with Save the Waves Coalition, the pressure is on to make sure the waves at his local surf break and others are preserved for generations to come.
Surfers haven't had much of a voice in the past, and I think Save the Waves has given surfers a voice here locally in Santa Cruz and then also all around the world to just voice their concerns about the waves and ocean quality and surf ecosystems. I want to make sure those kids have the opportunity that I did when I was younger to have waves to surf and an opportunity to become a professional surfer.
Meg Hilling, Newsy, Santa Cruz, California.
Many thanks for that in-depth reporting, Meg. After a brief intermission, we're unpacking the latest COVID variant, Omicron. It's been making headlines since it was first detected. We'll tell you more on the other side.